welcome to our newest episode. Thank you for joining me today. I have a special guest. Her name is Dr. Victoria Stakelum, and she is a transformation and success mindset coach. Her company is called The Success Myth. Victoria, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us a little bit about your background. Like, how did you become a transformation and mindset coach?
So my background is in corporate leadership. I've always loved learning. I feel very blessed. I had a really successful corporate career, but it's funny, towards the end of my corporate career, around 2018-19, I'd re-qualified as a psychologist. So I'm a psychologist. I was in corporate leadership, and I started thinking, I'm going to get back to coaching and NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, which are two of the tools in my toolkit. Started training in NLP. Now, I was first exposed to NLP at the very beginning of my career in 2001, where I went on a 3-day training as part of my graduate training scheme and learned NLP. I wasn't qualified in it or anything, but I learned it, and I thought, this is fascinating. I've always loved psychology and the human mind, and I thought, this is fascinating. And then I went into the world of my career and never really thought about it again. And then 20 odd years later, when I was qualifying officially as an NLP practitioner, I just had this profound realization. I was like, I know all of this. This is all stuff I do. It was like second nature. They were teaching us all the theory. And I was like, and I had this really successful career. I was a global strategy director in my early 30s. I was an executive shareholder in my mid 30s. I was a deputy chief executive before I was 40. Really quite an unusual level of success. And I went back to NLP and I was like, this is why. Everything I'm learning, I've been living. My kind of leadership style was all rooted in this stuff that for me was just second nature. But when I went and studied NLP formally, I was just like, it was me. It was everything I did. And they do say that NLP is like, what they say, a series of theories that fall out of the back of successful people or something. Essentially, the roots of NLP are they studied successful people and said, what are they doing? And then they codified it. And that's what you can learn. And that's what I was learning. I don't think it's that I was like some special creature. I think I just got exposed to it right at the beginning of my career, really got engaged with it. And so it stayed with me, but I was not aware of it. And when I learned it all again, I was like, oh, that's why. It's I was lucky enough to get exposed to NLP. So that kind of brought me back to NLP. I trained in coaching also quite early 2006. That was also quite a transformative moment where I was like, this is how I want to lead. And then for me, as for many other people, it was lockdown of 2020, big life reappraisal, a little glimpse into a slower pace and time to spend with my children, which had been a scarce thing over the intense years of my career. And when we started talking about going into the office, and I was the deputy chief exec, I was a key stakeholder in the decision, but myself and the vice chancellor, it was a private university I was running, did not see eye to eye. And I didn't want to go back. And I felt that the mood was that people didn't want to return to full office space. This was in like the June or July of 2020. People are not ready. And of course, we had many subsequent lockdowns, but I left at that point. We were living in the UK. We moved to Ireland to a kind of tumble down cottage with 12 acres on a lake. And now we have chickens and a polytunnel. And I run this lifestyle business of pure joy off the back of that NLP coaching and having requalified as a psychologist. And when I requalified, my specialism was neuroscience and mindfulness and the way we can hack our neurology to be more effective human beings. And then you layer in the NLP, and I've since done pranic healing and hypnotherapy. I just love lots of tools to just spend all day, every day helping people with all my little tools. It's a gift.
I love that. It's totally a gift. Yeah. NLP is fascinating to me. Tell us a little bit more about it.
Neuro-linguistic program, and what that stands for is neuro as in neurological, linguistic as in language, and programming, which is the way we codify things. So most of what we do on autopilot, we have processes running in the background that say, when my husband speaks to me that way, I snarl at him. When my child has a messy bedroom, I shout at them. We have these kind of autopilot responses. And to cope in life, most of what we do is autopilot. But a lot of that autopilot is informed by the things we say. And the things we say give away the program that's running in the background. It's why things like affirmations are quite interesting, because they help influence the background programming a little bit to make us more positive or feel more confident or whatever it might be. So neuro-linguistic programming is fascinating because as a master practitioner, I can speak to someone and I can hear their codified patterns in their language. And from that, I can see why they might not be achieving the things they want to achieve. And I'm able to, just through talking to them, have them change some of the programming. And NLP is interesting because it works at a really regular discursive level. Like we can be having a conversation and don't freak out. I can read a person based on how they speak. All the way through how I speak, I can shift how a person thinks. All the way through to really structured exercises where I say, take some deep breaths, we're going to ground and we will communicate with your subconscious a bit more hypnotherapy style. So it's a really interesting neurological change-based discipline. And I use it very broadly because a lot of people would use it as a series of exercises that they might take a client through. But because I've got all this other stuff, I work very fluidly. And at this stage, I'm pretty expert to help people flush up the subconscious stuff that's keeping them blocked.
I love that. I remember taking a class on NLP and it had to do with like your marketing messaging and how to write that so that you're expressing yourself and you're attracting other people.
Yeah.
So it was really interesting.
Yeah. And look, some people, it's funny, I had a prospective client book a call with me just this week, and then she'd obviously gone to my website and researched me, and she unbooked the call. And I said, is everything okay? What's happening? And she said, I'm really not a fan of NLP, so I don't want to proceed with the call. And I actually wrote back and said, I'd love to hear more, because I'm just curious for someone to have such a strong reaction. But I have another friend who's a cognitive behavioral therapist, and she's very iffy about it as well. And it's because NLP is used in salesmanship. Like it's why I was given training in it as part of a graduate training scheme. It's used in marketing because you can massively influence the way a person experiences something by the use of language. But I always think it's like leadership, power, a knife. You can do something terrible with it, or you can do something beautiful with it. So I don't think NLP is the problem. NLP being used in bad ways by people behaving badly, that's a problem. I would never use it that way. I think it's a beautiful way to help people unlock something brilliant. And but I get why it's incredibly powerful, and that scares some people.
Yeah, because it can feel manipulative, or it can be used manipulatively.
It can,
but, yeah. But if you're using it sincerely, I think it's fascinating. It is all psychology. You don't want to manipulate people, but you do want to be able to convey to them what you want, how you want them to feel, and how you want them to feel about you, and what you're doing. See if what you're doing is appropriate for them, or business wise.
I actually don't mind how people feel about me. I know I'm coming from integrity and from service. So if someone doesn't like something about what I do or say, these days I'm okay with it. It's really hard as an entrepreneur because you do deal with a lot of rejection and you have to take yourself on, don't you? So but I definitely think if you're a serious practitioner, because it's such a powerful tool, there has to be something about an ability to both have an open dialogue with a client, but also use your intuition. Sometimes people say they want to change something and you can actually change it, but it's not for them. You can't change it for them. You can change it with them. And if at some level they don't really want that to change, you actually can't change it. So some of that fear of I can be manipulated, it's a little bit like hypnotherapy. You actually can't, with hypnotherapy, make someone do something deeply against their values. The subconscious mind kicks in and says, no. When you hear or see these kind of hypnosis masters making people cluck like chickens on stage and stuff like that, it's because that person at some deep level is willing to play the game. And NLP is like that. If you ask me to, I don't know, fix an addiction to chocolate or help you overcome your fear of doing Facebook Lives, if there is something within you that is actually deeply opposed to that, I can't magic a change for you. But what I can do is flush up the fact that there is a block there and help you figure out, is that block based on a deep moral opposition to meta, for example, or is it just that I've got fear coming up? And for many people, for most people, it will be a fear block based in childhood trauma, usually, or some kind of adverse experience, or just some silly story that got told over the years that got embedded and embodied eventually. So then we can look at, okay, you get to choose. Do you want to release that block? And then you might get into secondary gain. Well, actually, that block, whilst it's stopping me from doing Facebook Lives, which I need to do to make my business grow, my subconscious neurology is saying it also protects me from, I don't know, bullying or being criticized or being rejected. So it's very multifaceted. And I can't make someone do something they don't want to do and they're not ready to do. And I wouldn't anyway, but I couldn't. And I'm really good at what I do, but I still couldn't just make someone do something they don't want to do. But what I can help them get to is the part of themselves that doesn't want to do it, and get into dialogue with that part and maybe give it what it needs to be given in order to go, okay, now I'm ready to let go of this thing. So it is quite complex. It's quite multifaceted. But that fear people have, if you'll somehow hypnotize me and use your snake eyes and then I'll do something, it just doesn't work like that. I do think there are some coaches out there, I've worked with a couple as a client, who have perhaps a degree of influence that for me is a bit too close, is a bit too push, a bit too close to the line. For me, that's not aligned to my way of doing things, so I don't love that. But I don't make it wrong either. I think sometimes it leads to people investing in coaching that otherwise wouldn't, and they get something from it.
You have to trust someone who is going to hypnotize you or work with you in hypnotherapy, don't you think?
Yeah, I think you do, but you don't necessarily have to come into the process with full belief. Like, I'm a funny one, so I work with all these practices that for some people are considered quite woo. They're certainly at the kind of, I work with the subconscious mind and emotions, which for some people, even those terms seem terribly impractical and fluffy. But I am also deeply cynical. There's something in NLP called meta programs, which are kind of ways of doing and experiencing things. And we have 19 different meta programs, and it's everything from introversion to my preferred mode of whether I describe things in terms of the way they look, the way they feel, or the way they sound. That would be a meta program. But there's a meta program called your convincer strategy, and it's how long it takes you to be convinced that something is right or true or a good choice. And for many people, like the most common convincer strategy is 2 or 3. If I experience something positively 2 or 3 times, I'll trust it. I have, and it's a very small bracket of people that have this, I have a perpetual convincer strategy. What that means is you are only as good as the last experience I had of you. So I could work with someone for 10 years and think they were amazing. And if they screwed up once, I'd be like, don't know if I still trust you as much as I used to. And then the next few good things will get me back to good. But in my field, I think it's actually quite helpful and interesting because it means I'm always researching. I'm the most academic or scientific manifestation expert you'll ever meet. I'll talk to you about the quantum physics of it. I'll talk to you about the psychology of it. The tools I might encourage you to use might still be the same tools as, I don't know, Joe Dispenza or name any other law of attraction practitioner, but I'm coming at it. I'm only convinced of it as long as it's working and as long as I can make sense of it in quite tangible ways. So I tend to appeal to people that kind of want a bit of that, but don't want to be in full woo land. They want to be healed, but they don't want to think it's being done with crystals and energy, even though I use a little bit of that. They want to understand the psychology and science of it. And I can explain that. I can explain the way cellular healing works. I can explain the relationship between the subconscious mind and our cells and turning things over. I can explain how energetic blocks become embodied and physical and how you can release them energetically, even though that sounds a bit woo. I can explain the science of it. So I think that helped for many people who might otherwise be it all sounds a bit wacky.
I feel like it's becoming more and more acceptable, though, or it's becoming more accepting, understanding energy and different levels and subconscious versus conscious and just those kind of things that maybe even 5 or 10 years ago, people were like, what is that? Why? What are you trying to make me understand? Or what are you trying to do to me?
I think you might be right. And I think there are a few really good books that have helped with that and a few kind of quite mainstream practitioners that have become noteworthy and visible, and the internet probably helped. So yeah, I think there probably is a greater acceptance. But it's funny, when I first stepped out of corporate world and into coaching, my first port of call was executive and leadership coaching because that seemed obvious. It felt safe. I mainly helped women because I had been in the boardroom at a very young age as a woman, and I did have some interesting experiences through that time. So I structured everything around that. And it was interesting, as I was relatively successful early on with that, but the shape of coaching I was doing was almost instantly straying into the more emotional subconscious mind space. And as I built out my toolkit, that just deepened and deepened. So I'd be giving executive coaches to CEOs, but I'd be doing timeline therapy on them to heal their childhood wounds. But I could not bring myself to adopt that positioning on LinkedIn. It was like LinkedIn, for the 20 years of my corporate career, I had been the terribly sensible grown-up professional. So to talk about even, I don't know, releasing emotional blockages, it felt way too out there for me. It took me, I'm about 4 years into this business, and I would say it took me 3 years to really get comfortable with talking about that aspect of my work. I still do the exec coaching and stuff, but to kind of position that aspect of my work as the center point, I was so blocked. I thought all those people that have respected me all those years are going to think I've gone loopy. They're going to laugh at me. But of course, the opposite happened. People that had worked for me over the decade came out in their drove for conversations because it resonates with many people. Like stuff's coming up when I'm at work and someone behaves a certain way, feel stuff coming up and they want to get rid of it because it's really hard to be super successful if your old stuff keeps coming up. It's really exhausting.
It also depends on what business you're in. And if you're like in a 9-5, I feel like sometimes you do have a harder time finding finding those passions and those feelings down deep because you are follow these instructions and you don't have a lot of wiggle room.
Yeah, it can be, but those people are often experiencing triggering relational situations. The way my boss speaks to me, the way my colleagues do, or I didn't hit my targets and the stuff that came up. So I think you're right. It's not such an obvious language, but people are still feeling what they're feeling. And when you can articulate that to them, yeah, I feel that way. And even the thing about career pivots into more meaningful occupations, like I've done, and I guess at some stage you've done, to be doing what you're, it's really hard to do if you're carrying all the old baggage with you. When I do the work I do with my client, we don't start with the big vision and the vision board and the affirmations and that kind of thing. We start with releasing all of the blocks, releasing the limiting beliefs, releasing the major negative emotions. If there's any trauma there, we get that dealt with. Because I know that the vision a person creates from the wounds is a different vision to the vision they will create from the healed. And the likelihood of them then achieving that vision is infinitely greater when the stuff is healed. It doesn't mean it goes away. It's a scar rather than an open wound. But so many of us in that autopilot phase, our day-to-day interactions are not actually a response to the thing that just took place. The thing takes place and it has an echo, something from our past or some belief we're carrying about ourselves whooshes up to the surface, and that's what we're reacting with. My husband didn't do the washing up. I'm in some kind of rage, or I'm asking a client for the sale and they say no. For a lot of business people, that brings up all of the rejection and I'm out of sorts for days and I'm not good enough and I can't, all this stuff comes up. Actually reacting to the fact that the person just said no to it. We're reacting from an entire history of rejection stuff or whatever it might be. Once you clear that out of the way, everything gets a lot easier.
Yeah. Do you just work one-on-one with your client?
Most of what I do now is group coaching. That was a real handle with care for me because I had been doing this work one-to-one and it was super effective. Like I've had extraordinary things happen with clients because I'm a psychologist. I guess that it gives me a bit more breathing room, but I've got people to come off anti-anxiety medication, come off depression medication, but then also in the kind of professional space, I've had clients go from 5 days, 3 days a week, get a promotion at the same time so that they're earning the same, having reduced their working hours. And then I've got a client that's just recently made a bestseller list because she published her book. My head's done in with work. I've never got any time. I've got this passion project, but I can't see how I'm ever going to make it happen. It's like now she's like an influencer online. It's extraordinary. I had a client, actually, she wasn't, I'll come on to the one-to-one thing. So I was doing this work with individuals and it was so much more filled with ease and joy than standard executive coaching, which is where I started. This is great. But of course, the investment to work with me one-to-one is higher and I wanted to find a way to be more accessible to more people and still pay the bills and still make it work. I reached out to a group of kind of friendly people. So some were old clients, some were people that I had a relationship with professionally. And I put together a small group and I was really open about it. I said, this is this work that we've talked about one-to-one that maybe they couldn't afford or they weren't ready for. I said, I'm piloting it in a small group. I don't know if it's going to work. I've structured it in such a way that I believe it can. I don't really know. And I took this first group of women through a 6-month process, which mirrored the process I do one-to-one. And in NLP, we talk about content-based work versus content-free work. So content-based is you're telling me what you're experiencing as I'm guiding you through something. And content-free is I'm guiding you through it, but you're not telling me what you're experiencing. So I have a bit tuned into what I'm seeing and more of the onus is on you to get with it and believe it and go with the process. I did do some work content-free when we were dealing with things that maybe people didn't want to pose and I didn't want them to feel that they had to tell me what they were thinking. So I'll say, you don't have to tell me, but make sure you vocalize it to yourself. So the whole thing had to be content-free, but the trade-off was the group. I'd never had a group container before. It turned out to be a crazy success. It was such a beautiful thing. The bonds that formed across these women easily counterbalanced the fact that I couldn't do that very kind of specific focus on an individual and with the content. The release work was just as powerful. The accountability that came with the group was much greater, and the sense of energy, and it took on an energy of its own. We put them in a WhatsApp group together. People were supporting each other and sharing their stuff, and it was just gorgeous. So that actually became the center point. That program, it's called the Chrysalis, is now the center point of that kind of release and transformation work. And I still give, usually that's what I'll recommend if people are presenting with those kind of, I feel unfilled, I want to change, I don't really know what I need or want, I just know that things aren't great, or maybe I feel that stuff from my past is holding me back or blocking me. That's the kind of presentation that normally shows up here. Sometimes, for example, if someone is under psychiatric care on medication, I'll recommend one-to-one. Some people just really want one-to-one, they don't want to do the group thing. But yeah, these days one-to-one is much smaller than the group. And I have actually had people in the group that are on long-term medication who have still had the same outcome. And I was a bit cautious with that. I need to keep a close eye on them, of course, particularly if they are reducing medication whilst they're in the group. But I've had full success rates so far. We're into our 4th cohort this September. September, and it's a beautiful thing.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah,
Wow.
it really is gorgeous.
You've already told me some of your successes. Is there one person in particular who really struggled in the beginning and blossomed in the end? Probably quite a few.
There are. I think that is the trend, is struggling to sort of glow in. One of the ones I love, I won't share her name or her case on my website, but I'll share more of her story than is on the website. When she came to me, she was suffering severe anxiety and depression and had diagnosed PTSD, so complex post-traumatic stress disorder. So if PTSD is you're basically okay, but then a shocking event happens and you get PTSD, it's actually quite healable because you're intact and the PTSD is a new thing that sits on top of your neurology. Complex PTSD is really hard because it's when you've had repeated trauma, so it's in your fabric. You have to go to much deeper layers to release it and be free of it. So this client came to me with that. It was showing up in relationship, in her health, in her family dynamic, which was really challenging for her. She was just in a really unhappy place. By the end of the program, she was free of anxiety and depression. During the visualization stage, so the program works, we do 3 months of quite intense release work, and then we move into the manifestation space and we start building the life we want. So she did her vision board about halfway through the program, and on it was relationship, marriage. She was a young woman, that was part of her vision board. That same week, I kid you not, she ended up in a phone conversation with a friend of her sister's who she'd had some kind of interactions with in the past, but it had never been a thing. But they started dating. By the end of the program, 3 months later, it was kind of getting serious. She texted me a couple of months back, they've got engaged since.
Oh, that's lovely.
On the website, in her case study, you'll see my sister and my mum described the change in me being like from night to day and just a new person. She also shed loads of weight. So often in the work I do, people's emotional stuff is playing out in their relationship with food and to a degree motivation. I'm not a weight loss. No one ever comes to work with me because they want to lose weight. But so often over that 6 months, people change their relationship with food. They get much healthier. They get much more functional in terms of motivation and not procrastinating. It's just really beautiful. And the other thing that's a common thread is family relationship healing. A lot of mother wound shows up in the work I do, which is where sometimes even without realizing, women are carrying the wounds of their mothers, either directly because of the messages their mother gave them, but often that their mother had some kind of trauma and they are carrying it for her. And what I love about that, I use a modality called timeline therapy. It can work generations. So often women are healing the block that they have carried for their mother or their grandmother, and they see a change in their mother, and their relationship with their mother changes as well. It's really extraordinary. The academic in me is, so yeah, it's amazing stuff.
That's fascinating. You are doing so many wonderful things for people in the world. We are grateful for people like you.
It's so selfish though. I do it because I love it. I get so much from it. It's real selfish mindedness because every one of these stories, I'm like, oh, I love this. I love it. I fall a little bit in love with every one of my clients, and it's such an amazing journey to walk with someone. Such a privilege.
Wow, we should all be in those type of positions. All be in those type of jobs that are so fulfilling.
Oh, yeah.
So what do you see for the future of your coaching practice? Do you feel like it's still new because it's only been 4 years in?
It doesn't feel new. In a way, I feel like somehow I'm expressing something that I always was. Like it's definitely a coming home for me. Even as a leader, the peak of my career, I was responsible for 300 staff and 9,000 students or something. And I was nurturing and developing people. I'm quite tough love. I will be very straight with people, but I'm very good at positioning things so that the shutters don't come up, and I can really give people the truth without it hurting them and upsetting them. And I was like that in leadership. So I got a lot of that then. So I suppose it's new, not new in a way. And I was always that person that friends came to. So it was always in my fabric. I think it's just fully expressed now. I think in terms of the future, I started in one-to-one, then I did group. I also have some more leadership shape things that are more like self-study courses and things like that. I have a really fantastic leadership program for women that's, again, gets amazing results, but it doesn't really do the deep stuff, but it definitely does quite a lot of deep self-reflection and moves people on a long way. But what I'd like to do, I think the next thing for me is to bridge the gap into something even more accessible. And Chrysalis is the group program. It's still quite a big investment for someone. One-to-one is a really big investment for most normal people. And then I have much lower end self-study courses. I have an app that has all sorts of interesting and fun gizmos in it that people can use. What I'd love is do maybe an 8-week program that costs hundreds rather than thousands, that gives people a real sense of forward motion, anyone, gives them a sense of working with me. For anyone, my goal with that would be, if you do the work, you'll get something really powerful from it, because not everyone has deep stuff that needs healing, although a lot do, and that'll be conscious level work, classic coaching shape, but that will still have my particular flavour, so it'll still go quite deep and it'll move people a long way. And then at the end of it, if someone has seen and realised that there's something deeper, then they can maybe consider moving into one of the bigger programs, and their mindset and their sense of self-worth is likely to be at a place then where that feels like something they're ready for. But yeah, I feel like I want to do something that's a bit short, sharp, higher impact. The Chrysalis is so in-depth. You go 6 months, we do a lot. It's a big commitment, and not just in terms of the investment, but like, it takes real courage to lean into that work and commit to doing 6 months of that level of intensity work. Now, the benefit is people are in a completely different experience of life by the end of it, but I think it'd be great to have a step between and that which is pretty intense. So I'd love to do something that's maybe an 8 week something, and that might be a bit of, I've thought about what I might do. I've got a product called Reality Reboot, which is the forerunner to that, and it'll be about upgrading all the different areas of your life, identifying blocks, doing your own work to release those blocks. I can teach people light touch methods to shift stuff. Most people need, if there's anything more serious, most people need a bit more of a helping hand. So I thought I might turn that into that program. But I also think I might do something on confidence. I am seeing show up everywhere. There's something that lack of holding people back, and I've got an amazing toolkit on confidence, and some of it's in the Chrysalis, or confidence is an outcome of the Chrysalis, but I think I can definitely get people's confidence without having to do all the release work. There's some stuff you can learn and some ways you can reframe it that will just shift that. So that's the other thing I might do. But yeah, a couple of programs in that kind of slightly lower commitment, slightly lighter touch, still really high impact, shorter time frame, I think is where I'll go next. And I'd love to, we built an app, we launched it, but we don't really promote it that heavily, and there's loads of great stuff in there. So I'd like to do more with the app as well.
Yeah, I love the confidence idea, because when you're working with, especially entrepreneurs, their confidence is low. There's so many things they can't do, so many things that they won't do because they're just holding themselves back or scared. And once you can build their confidence up, it allows them to feel like they can be out there, they can be themselves, they're freer to be creative, to talk to people, to do so much. So I think that's so important. I love that.
Yeah. And then the other big project is the book.
Ooh, you're writing a book?
I'm writing a book. So I've contributed to a number of anthologies, a couple on women, one on women and entrepreneurship, which is already out, one on the power of female CEOs, which has just come out. And then there's one that will come out at the end of the year on health and wellness, even though it's not really my niche, but it's all about becoming an unstoppable woman. It's about dealing with the stuff. Because one of the things with health and wellness is we normally tackle it at the behavioural end. We're trying to deal with habit through willpower, which is really hard. Whereas if you deal with whatever the little thing under the surface is, the subconscious story that you've been running or the identity that you've been carrying, you can shift that and everything else gets dead easy. You don't actually have to use willpower and effort. You will naturally make better choices. So I wrote a chapter on that because it's a story I found I share a lot, because I used to have a very unhealthy relationship with food and exercise. I had quite a dysfunctional body image for many years, but it's not my niche, right? So I just happened to be doing some additional training in something and did an exercise which showed up a limiting belief I'd been carrying that I'd been completely oblivious to. I saw the fact that it was just a made-up story. I let the story go. I lost 1.5 stone, and I'm in the best shape I've ever been in after decades of having issues with food and exercise. I thought I've got to write about that. So I contributed this chapter to this book that comes out in November. But there is a big book, and there's been a big book itching at me now for the whole 3 years I've been doing this, but I think it's nearly ready to be born. So I think next year, the book it's written in here, it's structured on paper, a good chunk of it's written already. I need to knuckle and get that written.
Yes, you do.
I'll let you know when I get there.
Please do, yes.
And that's all about the distinction. I've got, I think, 19 distinctions, nuances. When you don't recognise the distinction, you keep yourself stuck. For example, one of them is the distinction between attachment and commitment. I'm really passionate about this. I talk to clients about this a lot. Most of the time when we want something, whether it be a successful business or a size 10 figure or the perfect relationship, we're attached to it. We're clinging it tightly. I want this, which is a completely different energy to committing to that thing. And when we commit to something, we actually accept that we don't know what the outcome will be. But what we're committing to is going on the journey, doing the things. And sometimes that will lead to the outcome we want. Often it will, if we're truly committed, and sometimes it won't. But when we're attached, we're terrified of not getting the outcome. So we sabotage our own effort. So I really like this. And the energy of commitment is really, it's commitment committed, it's driven, it's motivated, positive. The energy of attachment, it's like tight and, I don't know, uncomfortable and effortful. And so that is one distinction. I've got a number of others. So it's storytelling and client examples, and there's a whole range of, I think I will call it the success distinctions, because I really feel like when you get your head around these and start living through them, you cannot help but be a successful person. I don't mean successful as in all of a sudden you'll be driving a Mercedes and have £1,000,000. I just mean you will feel expressed and aligned and fulfilled in your life and be achieving the things that for you represent success.
Yeah, I love that. Attachment versus commitment. That really gives you something to think about. So remind everyone what types of people that you like to work with, ideally.
I predominantly work with women, and typically I work with women who are ambitious, high achieving, often who have been very successful, but who have then run up against something, which is either the success came with a ceiling and it's because there's something showing up that until they break through it, they can't get beyond that boundary, or they got everything they wanted and they've realised it's not delivering. Like this actually, I still somehow don't feel good enough. I've now built a multi-million-pound business, still don't feel good enough. I thought that when I won these awards or made my millions or got to the, in my case, deputy CEO position, I thought I would all of a sudden feel different, like worthy. And for a lot of us, we get there, we do the thing, we realise I still feel exactly the same way. All those same insecurities and issues are showing up. So I really love working with people that are ambitious and committed and who have had success, because they're great. They get out and they do the work and they're open to it and they're committed. They're committed to making change happen. And often the people I work with have already been on quite a journey of self-development, self-exploration. I often work with people who have been in therapy for years, but they haven't had the breakthrough. And then because the methods I work with are a bit unique and a bit different, they get the breakthrough. So yeah, I love working with kind of ambitious, committed women who are just ready to do that up leveling, to let go of whatever this thing is. It's normally a very intangible, difficult to name thing. It's just a felt sense of, sure, there's more. I'm not quite sure what it looks like. I'm not quite sure what's in the way, but there's definitely something there. And if I could just release that, I feel like I could make it happen. Those are the women I work with because they're wonderful to work with and because it's so rewarding for me to help them release the thing and fly.
It's always better to work with motivated people who are going to do the work. That's very frustrating as a coach when you get in who say, I want to do it, but then they really don't.
Yeah, what they're actually saying is fix me. It's very challenging.
Yes.
Sometimes when they're like, fix me. Because I can't fix anyone, but what I can do is help them release the stuff that's in the way.
Yes. So how would you like people to reach out to you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Dr. Victoria Stakelum. You can visit the website, which is thesuccesssmith.com. And we also have a Facebook group, The Success Collective, which we also run regular events through and lives and things like that. Yeah, go to the website. There's contact us forms, reach out for a conversation. I love to meet people and explore where they're at and where they want to be and see if I can help dislodge whatever the thing might be that's stopping them.
Dislodge, that's a good word. One last question for you, please. If you could provide one tip to make the world a better place, what would that be?
It would be for everyone to pause and breathe before reacting. So much of what we do is react. We react, and a lot of pain and things that shouldn't have been said and difficulty comes from us being in that autopilot react mode. The practice of just breathing and then responding from a place of intention is life-changing. Something I teach.
Love that.
So yeah, if everyone did that, just imagine how much calmer and more effective and happier we'd all be if everyone was doing that. So that would be my tip. Yeah.
I love that. Victoria, this has been delightful. I love hearing about what you're doing and all the changes that you're making in the world. And I'm sure there will be people who are excited to reach out to you or find you on Facebook. I will put all those links in the show notes below. So can't thank you enough for joining me today.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.